Hello there, my friends. It's good to be with you. Salamun alaikum. It's time to have another interesting discussion with my dear friend, Dr. Joseph Noor. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Noor.
Wa alaikum salam.
So tonight we're having an extremely interesting and revealing discussion. We're going to deal with embryology. And Dr. Noor, being a biochemist, as I mentioned to you previously, as well as a medical doctor, a physician, he's spent years and years studying science, studying physiology, studying the anatomy, the human anatomy. And today the focus will fall on the human anatomy. Maybe not the anatomy so much, but we're going to look at embryology. Now, I want you to look at this program not as a science program, but this is a program in which, a discussion in which we are trying to elevate our Iman, because looking at this book, which is a book that comes from late antiquity, the Quran, from people who are often derailed as primitive people, although we know now that they were extremely civilized and extremely knowledgeable. Yet, the type of knowledge that is projected in this book should not have been present at that time in history. And that is one of the miracles I think we hold up of the Holy Quran, the Mus'haf. And I think when we have the discussion, look at it from that perspective. You're having a scientist here who has done an in-depth study, who's spoken to other scientists also, and looking at the Quran with that scientific perspective, and that is what we will do. I hope you will enjoy it, inshallah. I look forward to it. Doc, are you ready for our discussion? We will go into the studio then if you're ready.
Thank you very much for that lovely intro and introduction.
So let's go into the studio and do the discussion.
We're going to have a look at the inside the mother's womb.
Inshallah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I saw now I've got a slight clue from looking at the slides.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it after you. Right, let's get going. You know, some of the most mysterious areas of knowledge in the universe would be about the origin of the universe, would be about how the mind functions, and then I think another very mysterious area of study is the pathway from where the male and the female unite, come together, to the point where a new human life comes into existence. Now, it's an extremely mysterious area of knowledge. Yet, the Quran did not leave us wondering. The Quran, in fact, contains a number of verses that takes us from that moment of conception all the way through to the development of the new human fetus. So I have with me again my good friend Dr. Noor, as I've just said, and you know, I'm a very keen student of the Quran. I love reading and exploring the Quran. I find it fascinating. I see the verses in there being absolutely coherent and consistent. But it's good to have a person like Dr. Joseph Noor, who actually is the expert when it comes to physiology, embryology, who spent the years, looking at modern science, who's looked at the research. And so I'm really looking forward to his reading of the verses. Dr. Noor has published a book. It's called Document X, and find that book. It's on Amazon. I'll put the link up in the description of this video again. So, Dr. Noor, here we are again. Welcome to you.
Thank you. This is one of the highlights of the week for me. I don't know if it's for you.
Alhamdulillah.
Now, can I just go back last week for a minute? We spoke about the end of the universe, and I think I made 3 mistakes there. I referred to the Earth reverting back to its original state, and I said, and I spoke about the expansion of the Earth and then the contraction of the Earth. It should have been the universe instead of the Earth. Okay. So in other words, it should read, the universe will revert back to its initial state, and the universe initially expanding will then contract. That's basically what I think I missed out there.
Okay.
Now, what are we actually doing here? For those who joined us, much later or has just joined us, we're proving the existence of God, and we base this on the ultra-modern knowledge contained within the Quran. Now, if you are a Jew or a Christian or a Hindu or whatever religion you belong to, don't put your finger in your ears, because I'm not putting the Quran on a pedestal here. In fact, the Quran tells us that the amazing scientific accuracies contained in the Quran, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, was also given to the former prophets. So these phenomenal scientific accuracies contained in the Quran should therefore be traceable to the original Torah, the original Gita, and the original Gospel, and so on. So it's from this universal perspective that people should view my argument, and not from a restricted Quranic sense.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to hold that in mind.
Yeah. Of course, the Quran does address itself to Al-Nas. The Quran is addressing all of mankind.
Is it correct?
So nobody has sort of private property ownership of the Quran.
It is said that the most worthy of admiration is the development of an animal or a plant from its embryonic state. And the Quran, which does not leave out any fundamental principle or any important scientific phenomenon, would not have left out something as worthy of admiration as the developing embryo. We're going to go to Quran chapter 23 verse 12.
Okay.
I think it's just displayed now, isn't it?
Right, it is.
Yeah. So if you look at, these are the main verses, 23, 12, 13 and 14. And it gives us a brief summary of the embryonic stages of the vertebrates. So it gives a brief summary of the invertebrates, of the embryonic development of the invertebrates, including man.
Okay.
So you can read this.
Yeah. And it's chapter 23, verse 12 to 14. And certainly we evolved man out of an extract of clay. And after changing his state, we placed him as a sperm drop in an abode of stability in the wall of the womb for a predetermined time. And then we fashioned the drop of sperm into a mass of cells attached via a stalk to the early placenta. Then we formed out of it a tube-like embryonic mass. Then we formed bones within the mass and clothed the bony framework with elongated muscle groups attached to it. Then we produced out of it a new creation.
All right. So we're going to analyze these verses individually, and then we'll bring in the other verses which are of relevance here. Now you see there, the first verse says, and certainly we have evolved man out of an extract of clay. So man developed from the non-living matter of clay. Look at the wording the Quran is using, not clay itself, but an extract of clay. In other words, the active principles, the non-chemical or the chemical within the clay. So the Quran favors the chemical stage of the origin of life. So it began as a non-living process and then merged into a living biological process.
Okay.
So we're not going to discuss that because that is about evolution, right? Which we'll discuss at a later stage. Now it says, and after changing his state, or the state of his condition, actually, we placed him as a sperm drop in an abode of stability in the wall of the womb. Now, changing the state of his condition must include all the stages from the constituents of the earth right up till the invention of sexual reproduction, which is a defining mark in human evolution, as indicated by the words here, womb and sperm drop. I think that's important. So we're going to focus on the actual process. Now it says, so we placed him now as a sperm drop in an abode of stability in the wall of the womb. I will explain to you those verses that phrases that appear in brackets I've derived from other relevant verses.
Okay.
I've bracketed the word sperm because it doesn't appear in the original Arabic.
Yeah.
But I've derived it from another verse, 75:37. 75:37. It says there that the sexual liquid is intimately associated with the sperm. So you understand. So I've therefore derived the word sperm from that verse.
Yeah.
But a better translation actually is the fertilized egg, because the sperm drop gives you the impression of that the process is confined to the sperm, but it's actually the fertilized egg. And I'll tell you, and I'm going to give you 3 reasons why that should read, we placed him as a fertilized egg. So you can see there where Allah makes a general statement there, when He embraces her, she conceives. You see? So in other words, here Allah lays down the basic principle of reproduction, that conception can only take place through the instrumentality of a male and a female. Right? Now this is further made clear by the next verse. You can see there, and certainly we created man out of a small quantity of sperm liquid intermingled. So it says sperm intermingled. So it's mingled with something. Now Allah makes this what is the intermingling? What is Allah referring to there? This is made clear in the next verse. Now here it says, and certainly we created man from a mixture of fluids which issues forth from between the pelvic arch and the external genitalia. Now, if you look at the pelvic arch, the Quran describes the anatomy of the pelvic arch as an arch of bones completed by the lower backbone. That is the arch of that. And then there's another word in there, ribs, which does not fit with the anatomy. It must be discarded. You don't use meanings which doesn't fit the context.
Okay.
That's a whole basic principle of translation. So if you know your anatomy, you're not gonna add the ribs to that.
Yeah.
You look at the meaning of the pelvic arch. Allah described it as an arch of bones.
Yeah.
That is the only arch in your body. The arch of bone, which is the 2 iliac bones on the side, and then it says it speaks about the lower back, which completes the arch, and then the other meanings is the coccyx, which is the tailbone, and the ribs. That you must discard because it's not part of the anatomy of the pelvic arch.
Okay, so what you're just saying is that the translation is just simply off the mark.
Yeah, it doesn't
the wrong
fit.
translate.
If you don't know the anatomy of the pelvic arch, you're gonna extract those wrong meanings from. You have to know like we said earlier a couple of weeks ago. The principle of translation is you have to have a knowledge of the subject.
Yeah. Now, if you don't have any knowledge of the subject, then you won't know which term to pick. We spoke about sky last week.
Yeah.
If you don't know that there's a difference between the sky and between space and between
atmosphere,
then you will not make an intelligent choice as far as putting in the right word. But of course the Quran actually says that those, the ulil albab, those with knowledge, will have a better insight into the meaning. And you do require those who have insight into the topic to assist with understanding and explaining. The Quran won't contradict, let's say, for example, if the sun rises in the east. The Quran won't make an unscientific claim that, the sun rises in the west.
And it won't say it rises in the east and it rises in the west. It won't. That won't be part of the meanings.
Yes.
Then
yes.
you've got opposite meanings here.
Of course. So what you're telling us is that in terms of this translation here, we need to look at the word pelvic arch instead of ribs.
Ribs, yes.
Because the ribs has nothing to do with procreation, with semen production.
The ribs the ribs is there for respiration.
Yeah. So okay.
So now if you look, it says there, from the fluid which issues forth from between the external genitalia. I haven't put in the word there. I should put it in, but anyway, external genitalia and the pelvic arch. All right, I explained that. Now, the pelvic arch, or the pelvis, in other words, houses the internal sexual organs, right? Such as the ovary, the seminal vesicles, the prostate. Right. Now, since the internal genitalia is in the pelvis, and since the word genitals there is mentioned separately there, it must refer to the external genitals, because the internal genitals is accommodated for by the word pelvic arch, which contains the internal genitals. And since the genitals there is mentioned separately from the pelvic arch, it's conceivable that those genitals referred to there are the external genitals. Right? Now, since in classical Arabic, the pelvic arch is classically associated with female anatomy, it is conceivable that the external genitalia stated there refer to the testes which produces the sperm. Right? So if you combine those verses, it describes the ingredients necessary for conception. You need all those things. You need the internal genitalia, you need the external genitalia, you need the fluids. So everything is required. So as I said, you have to combine those verses, and the message is then that those ingredients are necessary for conception. Look at that verse. From a minute quantity of sperm liquid, he has created him and laid down the plan. Now, in the context, it is a genetic plan that would decide the embryonic stages and future features. Listen to that, check that verse out. So, what this verse tells us is that the fertilized egg contains the plan. What plan? The genetic plan. And if you look at the word qadara, look at that word, it's got a profound, deep meaning.
The word?
Qadara.
Qadara, right.
Yeah, check
right,
that word.
Right.
If you're listening, take that word out.
Qadar comes from like Laylatul Qadr. It is the fixing or the pre-deciding.
Yeah, it's exercising thought in doing something.
Yeah.
Or a program or a plan.
Yeah.
It means to develop in stages.
Yeah.
It means the correct relation of body parts.
Yeah.
You see, it's the vast meanings, and you can, and from that word qadara, you can see there now what this verse tells us, that the fertilized egg, that tiny little egg, which is hundreds of times smaller than an inch, contains the plan, the genetic
the layout,
the plan how to regulate the development of that single cell to a fully fledged baby.
Wow.
And that plan also determines the features of that embryo, whether it's going to be a plant or a fish or a frog, whatever. It depends on that plan, the program, the set of genetic instructions, which is actually the DNA. You know, and the DNA is also mentioned in the Quran, by the way. We can do that in the future lecture. So that's important. So in other words, the Quran tells us here that fertilized egg in that tiny egg is the instructions to regulate this whole process from that fertilized egg to a fully fledged baby. And it will determine the type of features of that embryo and hence the species type.
That's amazing. That's exactly what DNA does.
Yeah.
DNA
you get,
is the blueprint.
If it's plant DNA, it's going to be a plant.
The blueprint of the future new being is laid down in that DNA.
There's a set of instructions in chemical form.
Yeah.
But now look at this. What you also can deduce from this verse is that our essential humanity is derived from that genetic plan. I want you to follow this because I'll come back later to this thing again, because nothing is said there about the divine spark being blown into the infant there. It says there that the features of that embryo is determined by the genetic plan. So it's the genetic instructions that will determine whether you're going to be a human being with a personality or a frog or whatever.
Okay.
All right. So let's go back now, Anwar, to the first verse again. Now, we see we placed him as a drop of sperm in an abode of stability in the wall of the womb, right? So what happens now? The cell, one cell, the fertilized egg, divides into 2, then into 4, then into 8, until it's about 32 cells, right? And that mass of cells is called the blastocyst. So that is the embryo when it's 7 to 12 days old, and it has a cavity there as well. Now this blastocyst, which consists of 16 cells, migrates now down through the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes connect with the ovary, for those who don't understand the anatomy. And fertilization actually takes place in the fallopian tubes, where one of the sperm is the winner, who gets there first to the egg. So you're the winner.
Yeah.
Right? Out of couple of million.
We're all winners.
All right. So this fertilized egg now migrates down towards the womb. And the womb is described there as an abode of stability. Why? Because it is the safest and most secure environment for the developing embryo, the womb, the mother's womb. Now, what happens is now the blastocyst, what is called now the blastocyst, burrows into the wall of the womb. Right? Now, that is not stated there in the wall of the womb. It's in brackets. Now, and you can derive that. Now, it says there for a predetermined time, right? Which means the gestational period. In other words, Allah tells us there that this embryo will remain in that womb for a predetermined time, which is the gestational period, which is 38 to 40 weeks. Right? All perfectly correct. Then now, let's go to how do I derive that wall of the womb? Now that blastocyst digs into the wall of the womb.
Okay, this is the womb here.
Yeah.
And this is the new embryo.
That's digging, burrowing
right. So
into
it's
the
burrowing
wall.
into the womb here.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
All
got
right.
it.
Yeah. Listen to this verse now. Your wives bear your progeny like preparing the soil for planting of a seed. In other words, human implantation here is compared to the implantation of a seed.
Right.
Now let me explain. If you want to plant a seed, what do? You excavate the soil a little bit, you place the seed in the hole there, and you close it up with a layer of sand, right? In the same way, the blastocyst buries itself into the womb,
the wall of the womb.
And then the blastocyst is covered there by a layer of cells there. Show the layer of cells there. Like the layer of sand you put on the soil. You remember you close it up with
so this yeah.
Right.
Is this the layer of cells?
Yeah, that's the layer.
Okay.
That's the inner lining of the womb.
Oh, I see.
Now we see. What happens now is this blastocyst now grows out villi or finger-like projections, which
That looks like it there.
which penetrate the wall of the womb, right?
Wow.
And this will become the placenta, from which the embryo derives its nourishment for the rest of its career in the womb. Similarly, the seed, which buries itself in the soil, grows out rootlets from which it derives nourishment.
Amazing. Okay. So that resembles roots digging into the soil or growing into the soil?
For nourishment.
Aha.
So Allah describes here the early placenta and
So this verse here is what you're saying. Your wives bear your progeny like preparing the soil for the planting of seed.
So you prepare the soil when you plant the seed, right? You've got to prepare the soil.
Yeah.
So in the same way, the womb is also prepared, it's ready for fertilization. It prepares itself for fertilization.
Right. Okay.
Right. Now go back to the first verses again. And then So what happens now is that now the attachment of the embryo to the placenta, is evident from the fact that it's attached via a stalk. Look there. And then we fashion the drop of sperm into a mass of cells attached via a stalk to the early placenta. So the attachment of the embryo to the placenta is clear from the fact that it's attached via a stalk, which is clearly the future umbilical cord. So the embryo is suspended in this cavity, suspended by this stalk, which is attached to the placenta, from which it derives the nourishment.
Wow.
Right. So now I says there, and we fashion the drop of sperm into a mass, and I put in bracket cells. You know why I did that actually? Because in other translations it says, and then we fashion the drop of sperm into a lump of flesh. Now a lump gives me the impression of a disorganized mass of tissue. It's a lump. It's something just lumped together. And that is not what the embryo is. It's a collection of cells organized in a very accurate way. That's why I've inserted the word cells there, because the Quran gives us a description of what cells are, because everything is made of cells, and the embryo is all about cellular division. Now, Allah gives 4 verses in the Quran which describe the cell. Now 7:1, it is He who originated and evolved you from a single living entity. Now the single, He, in other words, He originated and evolved you from a single living entity. A single living entity is a good description of a cell. It's a single living entity, because the cells are the fundamental units of life. That's the first description of the cell. Now second one, that it refers to the fact that the cell can grow and divide. A seed is like equivalent to a fertilized egg. It can grow and divide. That's the second description of a cell. The third one. Now, recall this verse where we spoke about the genetic plan. So the cell contains the genetic instructions. So that's the one. Then you go to the next one. There we said we made from water every living thing. So here the Quran tells us a major component of all living tissue is water. And cells is part of living tissue. So it gives us the 4 descriptive terms of a cell.
There we have to unfortunately leave it for this particular episode, so we will continue the discussion on embryology in the next video. Look out for that one.